we are speaking with Dr. Angie Krause of Boulder Holistic Vet, and she's going to share with us about feline nutrition. Dr. Angie is a holistic veterinarian in Boulder, Colorado. She empowers pet parents to become medical advocates for their pets. Her practice combines both traditional and alternative therapies to make her patients as happy and healthy as possible. Dr. Angie's journey to become a veterinarian started over 35 years ago when her mother brought home a black kitten. In 2007, she graduated from Texas A&M University with a Doctorate of Veterinary Medicine. She combines traditional and alternative therapies in her practice, including acupuncture, herbal therapy, myofascial release, and physical medicine. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Angie, and I would say Dr. Angie helped me when my little kitty Misha was suffering with cancer, and she was a great help even on a virtual, that was from a virtual standpoint. She was really supportive and helpful to me. So thank you, Dr. Angie, for helping so many of the animals that you care for, as well as all the other Dr. Kennedy and everybody who is out there taking care of animals. So anyway, Dr. Angie, I hope you are out there.
Thank you so much for being here. I love hanging out with cat people. I am a cat person. I was raised by a cat lady and I grew up with lots of cats. And I think you guys are the best and you're definitely my tribe. Today, we're going to talk about 4 ways to improve your cat's nutrition. I know you've been on the computer all weekend, and so I'm going to put these 4 things at the very beginning. My lecture's mostly about nutrition, but because I have this platform at the very end, I'm going to make a plug for other ways you can help your kitty. As you guys all know, cats are so underserved, and so to have this opportunity to make a plug for anything that's going to help them out, I just really wanted to do that. So I'm going to color outside of the lines just at the very end, just for a few minutes. As Stacy told you, I graduated from Texas A&M in 2007. I've been practicing for 14 years. I have a house call practice, and so that means I actually see a lot more cats than I do dogs on a daily basis. And that's been really great because most people don't want to bring their kitties to the vet. So I come to them, and as a result, I have some really great relationships with my feline patients. I would love to hear from you. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me at angie@boulderholisticvet.com. So if there's something in the lecture you want to hear more about, or you just have a question, please don't hesitate to send me an email. So let's just get started. We've been feeding cats all wrong. And a lot of this information is unfortunately not new. 17 years ago, when I started learning about feline nutrition, I learned most of this, not all of it, but most of it. And it's just taken such a long time for it to permeate through the veterinary industry and just really throughout society. But we've just not been doing it very well. And it's tricky because cats are not small dogs, and I think we've learned that over time, although veterinary medicine has very much been treating them as small dogs. But they're not really descendants of lions and tigers. Genetically, we know that that's not true either. So let's put them in their own class. I feel like they deserve their very own class, but they are obligate carnivores, so they require meat, and that is a really important thing to understand about feline nutrition. So the mistakes we've made is first feeding kibble. And if you're feeding your cat kibble, this is in no way meant to shame you. Or if you are feeding feral cats kibble, this is not to shame you. Sometimes we have to use kibble. But as an industry, when we started making kibble for dogs, we thought, oh, well, we'll do it for cats too. And then we began to free feed them kibble. We brought them inside. We spayed and neutered them, and we really messed up a lot of things for our kitties. I think that we made a mistake when we started feeding our cats lots of grains. That's controversial, that opinion of mine. And I feel like most things in nutrition get a little dogmatic, and I try not to get that way. I feel like with cats, it's a little bit more black and white, but grains are more controversial. So I just want to put that out there. That's just my opinion, that cats shouldn't really be fed grains. And then the other mistake we made was just feeding them once or twice a day. And then we're going to get to why that really isn't how they were eating and how we should be feeding them. So here are our mistakes. So what do feral cats eat? Like we all have this obsession to figure out like what our ancestors ate or what would we be eating if things weren't so processed and industrialized. And so feral cats, they take down birds and mice mainly, and they also eat frogs and reptiles, rabbits and bugs, and grass and plants. But they eat 10 to 20 small meals per day, and that's a lot. And so when we bring a cat inside and we feed them a couple times a day, or we free feed them just a really high carbohydrate kibble, we've kind of just really gone far away from this more natural model. So here are the 4 changes, and I'm going to go through each of them. But if you can do all 4 of these, you're really going to be improving your cat's quality of life. And there's definitely physical health and mental health and social health benefits. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is ditch the kibble. We're going to get into why and how you can do that, what the alternatives are. Second, I'm going to have you feed more often. As you can see, cats left to their own, they are snackers. They want to eat frequently. I'm going to ask you to feed your kitty separately to help reduce their stress. And I'm going to ask you to play a game before mealtime. So besides the kibble, besides changing the diet, all of these things are really easy, actionable things that you can do. So why is kibble so bad? I mean, because kibble's so convenient and it's inexpensive, and so it doesn't smell so bad. So why should we not be feeding it? Well, the first thing is it's too high in carbohydrate. Even if we get grain-free kibble, which is really popular, and people will say to me, but I feed a high-quality grain-free kibble. And I would say it's still too high in carbohydrate, because just to make a little piece of kibble crunchy, you have to put some potato in it, or some type of starch like a pea, some kind of carbohydrate, just to get it in that form. And so kibble in general is just not so good. It causes obesity. Most cats can lose weight just from switching to kibble to literally almost anything else, whether it's raw or canned. My roommate and I in vet school, we had 6 cats between the 2 of us, and we used to line them up and we took a picture because we learned this information in vet school, like, okay, cats shouldn't be eating kibble. So we took our cats off kibble, we put them on a canned food. We took a before and after picture of them all lined up before and then after, I think it was 2 months of canned food. And literally between all 6 of them, we had lost a collective cat. And so that's all we had to do. So 10 extra pieces per day of kibble, which that's not hard to do at all, causes 1 pound of weight gain per year. So you think about a 10-pound animal, you know, if someone weighs 120 pounds and you gain 12 pounds every year, that would lead to a really unhealthy place relatively quickly. Kibble just doesn't have enough moisture for cats. Cats are desert animals and they don't drink enough water. They're just notoriously poor water consumers. And so when we feed them kibble, we're just not helping any of that. And so I really prefer foods that have moisture. And we also know kibble accelerates dental disease. We know for dogs, it's different. We think, oh, we're cleaning their teeth with kibble, but cats were actually making it worse. There is a dental diet for cats that I think is really, it's pretty controversial how much it helps, but regular kibble we know makes their periodontal disease, so all the tartar and the gingivitis, it actually accelerates it. And there are other reasons why kibble might not be so great, that, you know, it's more a processed diet, but I'd say these are the top 4. So what should I feed instead? Let's say you have a 10-year-old cat, you've been feeding them kibble, you know, you'll think, okay, Angie, what do you want me to do instead? And I'd say the 3 options are canned, raw, you could do frozen or freeze-dried, or home cooked. Home cooked's a little bit tricky, but I'm gonna get into that. So canned is by far the easiest. It has high moisture, high protein, and low carbohydrates. So this is everything a cat should be eating. It really does mimic the mouse diet, like what we think cats should be eating, really well. I like a lot of brands, and I just wanted to throw up a few brands here for different reasons. I really like Wellness. I like it because it's easy to find. You can get it at PetSmart, you can get it online, you can get it at some grocery stores. But what Wellness has done well is that they have a lot of different flavors and they have a lot of different textures. So they really, cats are particular about that mouthfeel. So you might have a pate cat, you might have like a gravy cat, you know, just whatever your cat likes. I feel like Wellness has it, and you can definitely keep a lot of variety staying within the same brand. I like I Am Loving You. I represent that brand, just full disclosure. But what I like about them is that they have a high quality canned food that you can buy at Kroger, King Soopers, Whole Foods, like your grocery store. And so I think that's great. Waruva and Tiki Cat are both really popular in the like higher end pet food stores, and my patients seem to like them and do well on them. Canned food has a little bit of a caveat, is that it might be linked to hyperthyroidism. I believe that you know, some of the linings are problematic. I think a bigger risk for cats these days are all the retardants, the fire retardants in the carpets, our furniture, all the building materials. And I also think that there's a more of a genetic predisposition, but we do know that those contribute. I feed my cat a canned diet. He has inflammatory bowel disease. That's what he does best on. And so I still am a big fan of canned diets. And so despite the link to hyperthyroidism, I still think the benefit outweighs the risk. So raw feeding is my absolute favorite. If I could get my cat on a raw diet, I would. He doesn't do well on it. So not all cats do well. But he's also has really severe inflammatory bowel disease. But my patients that are on raw foods tend to do the best. They tend to be the healthiest. They tend to be lean and happy. You can get raw food in frozen patties or chubs, and you just defrost it. You let it come to room temperature. I like to just slightly warm mine, and some people think that's controversial, but I wouldn't want to eat cold food, especially in the winter. So I just, you know, pass that on to the cats I have in my house or my patients. You can also get raw in a freeze-dried or dehydrated form. And the difference between these two is just the moisture content. But you basically just add water back in. I'm careful of these. I like to make sure that they don't have a lot of carbohydrates, because this is kind of a tricky way where carbohydrates can sneak themselves back in, but most cats really like freeze-dried food. So this is a good way to transition cats that have been on kibble to a raw diet. Usually they really like freeze-dried food. They have raw foods have high water content, high protein, low carbohydrates. So it's like, you know, that's the holy grail for cats there. We just want high protein, low carbs, and a lot of water. And there's a lot of great brands. My patients and I really like Stella and Chewy's. I feel like Stella and Chewy's freeze-dried food is like crack cocaine for cats. Most cats just can't get enough of it. Instinct, Primal, Darwin's, they're all really good. And the great news for cats and for us is that there are more and more brands coming on the market. And so you could really walk into any natural pet food store or go online to Chewy and find a lot. And it's good because our cats are so picky, so sensitive. And so usually I'll prescribe a few brands, and then ultimately my patients are definitely calling the shots there. So home cooking. I'm a big fan of home cooking, but I have to admit, it's hard. I've never cooked for cat because of their picky mouth feel. And they're just so sensitive to texture that I've never personally had a cat be part of my family that would eat anything besides like potato chips off my plate. Usually like the mouth feels all wrong. But I do have patients in my practice that are cooked for. You have to keep it balanced. You can't just go to Whole Foods or King Soopers and grab grab some meat and chop it up and call it good. I mean, you could do that, but it's not going to be balanced. And this is where I really like to bring in all the information we have about nutrition, vitamins and minerals with more of the natural approach. You know, because if you go into the grocery store and get a turkey breast, you're missing the organs, the skin, you know, like all the things that your cat would eat if your cat was large enough to take down a chicken. And so if you go to places like balanceit.com, they sell a supplement where you can create your own recipe and then add the supplement. So you make sure your cat's getting things like vitamin D and selenium and things that they wouldn't be getting unless you would be adding this in. Omegas are really important. Another resource I like if you really want to cook for your cat is Dr. Karen Becker's Real Food for Dogs and Cats. She has recipes in there that she's already balanced. You can also hire a veterinary nutritionist at acvn.org, and they will design a diet that you can cook. My only complaint with some of the diets that they create, or that they heavily rely on pastas and rice and things that I think cats shouldn't be eating. But if you ask them to do either like a low carbohydrate or no carbohydrate, like no grain diet, they would do it, but they wouldn't agree with you. I think that they would oblige. Okay, so we've switched our cat's diets, hopefully, or maybe we're at least gonna just try out canned food. And the next thing I'm gonna ask you to do is feed more often. And as you move away from kibble, your cat's going to force you, or at least attempt to force you to feed them more often, because they're not gonna be satiated for as long. And so I usually tell people, if you switch from kibble to can, expect to feed your cat 3 to 4 small meals a day. So cats naturally eat 10 to 20 times per day. And so we're feeding them once or twice a day. Like, how can we bridge that gap? Because it's unobtainable to feed your cat 20 times a day. There's just no way. So I would ask you today, like, can you go from 2 meals to 3 to 4? Or if you're at 3 to 4, can we do a couple snacks throughout the day and get to 5 to 6? Also, feeding more might be beneficial, or we know it's beneficial for cats with lower urinary tract disease. If your cat has cystitis or pees outside the box or has had stones or crystals, this might be a really good way to help with their pH. And this is probably the case because cats generally would be eating more often, and that's how they keep their urinary pH a little more settled. Okay, so strategies to increase meal quantities. I really like automatic feeders. I'm a single mom, I'm a single doctor practice. Like, there's no way I'm feeding my cat 5 or 6 times a day, and I'm going to just remember to do that. He might remind me, but I'm not gonna remember too often. So I really like automatic feeders. My favorite is the Catmate C20. You can get it on Amazon, and you can use an ice pack underneath. So when you're feeding your raw or you're feeding your canned food, you can keep it cold, because it is kind of gross to leave raw out, and even canned all day. It gets kind of crusty. And then the treat dispensing toys. There's so many great ones. One of my favorites is the Trixie 5-in-1 Cat Activity Center. And then there are little balls that you can have your cat roll around. And so what I like to do, instead of dispensing kibble, because we're trying to move away from that, is I'll do like a freeze-dried raw or a dehydrated treat. And there's so many of those that you can find online. It's pretty easy to do this moving away from kibble. So the third thing that I want to get you to start doing, if possible, is to feed your cats separately. I can still remember back in vet school when my roommate and I were feeding all 6 of our cats side by side. Now, luckily, we thought they all got along, but I look back and think, ooh, how stressful were we making their lives? As you all know, there's so many things that we do that just stress out our cats that we don't realize, and this is one of them. So cats usually hunt and eat alone. And so when possible, feed them separately and make sure they just can't see each other. So like putting their bowls side by side and then asking them to get elbow to elbow and just eat might be causing some stress that you don't know about. And they might not be outwardly fighting, but if you can just give them some space, you could really decrease your cat's stress. And I am all for that. So that's really easy to do. Even if you have a kitchen island and you're just feeding them around the corner from each other, you don't have to feed separate rooms and shut the door. I mean, unless that's what you're already doing. You don't have to do that, but just get them out of sight from each other. That's something really easy you can start doing. Another thing that you can do is play a game before a meal. It can't be done for every meal, especially now that I'm trying to get you to feed your cat 5 or 6 times a day, but aim for 1 to 2, even 1 would be great. A treat dispensing toy will do this, but get that prey cycle going. I really liked a bird. That's my favorite toy because it really mimics that flight pattern of a bird. So even if you just play with your cat for a minute, or depending on how old they are, like my 15-year-old cat would probably play for about 30 seconds and then be done. So play for that 30 seconds, let them catch it, and then give them their food. And that really helps decrease stress and makes them feel like they're catching it and they're eating. And it's something really easy that you can do as many times a day as you have time for. So we've done those 4 things, but I have a few other topics that I feel like are really important to talk about. Feline nutrition and obesity. The reason our cats are so obese is that we spay and neuter them, which we absolutely want to do. No one wants to live with an intact cat, and we definitely need to control the cat population. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, but we have to understand the repercussions of doing that. We spay and neuter them, we take away their sex hormones, and then we put them inside. And so we really promote obesity. And then when we add that trifecta of feeding them kibble, we're really only leading them to be obese. And so it's really important that we cut the kibble out. So here's just what I was talking about. Here are the things that we do. We turn them into couch potatoes. And so we can counteract this by taking away the kibble. We're definitely still going to spay and neuter them, but we're going to help them exercise more. We're going to get them outside, catios. Giving your cat backyard access safely is something that can really increase their quality of life. You can get fencing that goes along the top of your fence so that they can still go outside and, roll in the grass and be more active. There are catios. There are prefabricated catios that you can just buy on Wayfair to get your cat outside and get your cat more active, playing with your cat. I know that, you're supposed to have a litter box on every floor, but my cat doesn't have any problem using the litter box no matter where it is. So I put it in the basement, and he usually hangs out on the 2nd floor in my room. So I make sure that he has to go all the way downstairs to eat or use the litter box because I want to keep him active. And then we're going to keep feeding them low carbohydrate, high protein, high moisture diets. If there's anything you take away from today's lecture, is that those are the 3 things that we're going for. And so we really can influence cats' body condition by doing these things, and it's our responsibility to do that. Now, every once in a while, I have a cat that's fed a perfect diet, that is exercised, and they're still overweight. But probably in the past 14 years, I've had a handful of those. And I've worked really hard, and sometimes no matter what we do, we're just going to have cats, and there's probably some metabolic disease that we haven't diagnosed or figured out yet. But for the most part, you can keep your cat at a pretty good body condition just by following these recommendations. And a lot of the diseases, a lot of the arthritis, the pancreatitis, all those things we're causing by things that we're doing. So you can have a much healthier cat. The other point I wanted to make was nutrition and kidney disease. This comes up in my practice, almost every day, at least every week. Most cats, as they age, have some kind of kidney disease. I've got a picture of this senior cat here with this really fun necklace on, but they almost all have kidney disease. And when most veterinarians see this on paper, they say, okay, you need to put your cat on a kidney diet. kidney diets are actually pretty controversial, even with traditional veterinary internists, because what kidney diets do is they restrict protein and phosphorus. And protein restriction for obligate carnivores, it has some pretty detrimental consequences. So what's going to happen is as we lower our cat's protein intake, we're going to start to see muscle wasting. And we already see that as our geriatric cats age. And so we know we're hastening that. And so we're decreasing that muscle mass. And we're also decreasing the amount of protein that the kidneys need to filter. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I feel really conflicted about this. And the other problem with these kidney diets is they're not as palatable. A lot of the people I work for, they look at the ingredient deck of these prescription kidney diets, and they're really offended because I work for people that want a more natural approach. There is one company, Blue Buffalo, makes a line of veterinary diets that don't use like corn and soy and wheat. And so their ingredient deck is not as offensive, but we still wonder how and when should we decrease the amount of protein that my cat needs to eat. We all know we need to decrease the phosphorus, and that's proven and that makes sense. But the protein is really hard. And unfortunately, to decrease the phosphorus enough, we are decreasing protein. So what do you do? I can tell you with my own cats that have been in renal failure, I continued to feed them their high protein diet. I elected to have them stay as muscled as long as possible. But you could consider a canned renal diet in the later stage of renal disease. When I say later stage, I usually think of like when creatinine's above 3 or stage 3, the IRIS stage 3 kidney disease, and you can talk to your veterinarian about that. And then I use the least protein restricted kidney diet. The good news is the pet food companies, the prescription pet food companies are catching on, and they're actually starting to make protein restriction come in stages. So I'm happy to see that. I always use canned diets if you want to use a kidney diet. And then at the end of the day, I actually just feed them what they'll eat. I don't prioritize kidney diets, and that's just my own 2 cents. It doesn't mean it's wrong if your veterinarian recommends a kidney diet. I feed my cats their normal diet as they age that works for their digestion, and there's just no one size fits all. What I will say, and this is my opinion, is that when cats are in the early stages of renal disease, it pains me to see them put on restricted protein diets. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And if you were to get a group of veterinary internal medicine specialists in the same room, no one would agree on when we should start protein restricting. So I try to wait as long as possible, and I might not even do it at all. Okay, so here I'm gonna color outside the lines for just a minute because I have you sitting in front of me, and I'm so grateful for that because I want to help as many cats as possible. And I want to tell you that cats are in pain and we don't know about it. And I can empower you to help your cat. And what I want everyone to do here is go to the felinegrimacescale.com, and I want you to learn this. Now, if you had tons of cats, you probably actually already intuitively knew a lot of this. Once I learned the Grimace scale, I realized, I was like, oh, I think I already kind of knew this, because you see, I've seen enough cats at least over the years that I know are in pain, and I know what their face looks like. But there's a couple problems that we have with cats, and I'm put a picture of a dog here because dogs have all these advocates for their pain. They have their people, like dogs can't jump up on the couch or jump into the car, and dogs see their veterinarian more often. And they also have a lot more options for pain control. We have so many more drugs that are effective for dogs than we use in cats. Dogs are easier to medicate. And I see so many cats 10 and older, and sometimes younger than that, that are in so much pain. And they just sleep on the couch all day and no one notices, and they don't get treatment, and it just breaks my heart. So things that you can help reduce pain in your kitty is weight loss. I cannot stress that enough. I've seen so many great turnarounds when we just get our cats leaner. Low carbohydrate diets, one more time. Regular dental care. I'm going to harp on this one more time later, but cats get horrible dental disease that they will never stop eating. You probably won't see it, but make sure you're bringing your cat to a vet and getting regular oral exams and regular dental care, because they won't say a thing. And it's so sad how many cats have painful dental disease. CBD can really help with arthritis and so many other things. I'll go over that in a minute. But acupuncture and chiropractic, these are really great tools for cats. And most people think, how is my cat going to sit still for acupuncture? But for one, they usually do, and two, they actually don't need to sit there for that long. I use a lot of Japanese acupuncture for my patients, and I get great results. Even if they hate it, usually they learn that it feels good and they will sit there for me. Massage and laser are two things that I've really seen make a difference for painful cats. And gabapentin, that's another drug that we use to help reduce pain in kitties. And there's a few other ones, but I want these to start being on your radar, and I want you to educate yourself about the Grimace scale and when cats are in pain. And then when your cat becomes less mobile, like you are their advocate, and there are things that we can do. The other thing that I really want to drive home today is that cannabis is amazing for cats. And I use hemp in my practice. I don't use marijuana. So the cannabis plant, like hemp and marijuana, look exactly the same. So this picture I have up, you wouldn't know what it is. You can only know if it's hemp if it has less than 0.3% THC. And that's the psychoactive component. That's what gets you high. And cats aren't nearly as sensitive to THC as dogs, their counterparts are. But I don't want my cats to get high because I don't know how that feels for them. I know that certain, that can make you paranoid, it can feel bad, and we have all these great benefits of cannabis without getting high. So CBD, that gets a lot of press, but the cool thing is when we use hemp, full spectrum hemp oils, is that there are other phytocannabinoids, and that's just a fancy word for all the other components. Like there are terpenes and flavonoids and CBG and CBN. There are all these great things that work together that help reduce inflammation and promote an overall sense of well-being. And because cats have so little care, I've seen CBD really help with arthritis. I've seen cats that, their people didn't even know that they were struggling until they started treating. It really helps with anxiety. And our cats have so much more mental illness than I think we really know about. I have one patient in my practice who's 20 years old. We started giving her CBD because she was just kind of getting weak in the back end and looked like she was hurting. But it turns out she was actually quite anxious, and she had been kind of like living up in one room for her whole life. We started giving her CBD and she started coming out. And that lets me know that there was a lot of anxiety that we're treating with the CBD. Chronic boogers, like if you have a boogery cat, we call them chronic snufflers. I've seen CBD help that. I've seen CBD help IBD and chronic herpes cases. I've seen CBD help a lot with that too. And because cats have such few treatment options, I feel like CBD has been such a godsend for so many of them. And I use HempRx. You can find it on my site. And so I just really encourage you, whether you use that brand or any other brand, just give it a try and make sure you're dosing enough. I have a dosing chart on my website. But it's made such a difference for so many cats that are in pain or anxious or sick. There are two things that I want you to think about when you like raise your cats and as you are loving them. Feed them well and take care of their mouth. Those are the two things that I really hope that you can do. And I'm so grateful that you guys are here. And now I want to take some questions. I want you to email me if you have any questions too. I'd love to stay in touch. And then Stacy, how can I take questions?
In terms of like a certified humane food, do you have any recommendations with that? We've had a couple questions about sort of what your thoughts are on those like labeled foods that are labeled certified humane. There's Open Farm, and and then there was another brand mentioned too in here. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Like when it's like a human like grade, is that what you're
Right.
asking?
I guess there's some pet foods, some cat foods that are labeled certified humane. And does that labeling, I mean, so I guess the question was specifically around this Open Farm wet food, and I'm trying to find the note with the other one, but I don't see it now. There was another one mentioned. But do you have an opinion or a thought on that one?
I mean, if you're talking about like a humane or human grade ingredients.
It's certified humane, that like, so that it's like the animals I call them happy animals, that they're raised humanely.
You know,
We
I can't speak to whether or not that is a marketing ploy or if those animals are actually treated any differently. That is something I can look into.
Do you know if there's been any research or papers that that support kibble as exacerbating dental disease?
Yes, I could actually, I could hunt those down if you want me to. In fact, let me put on my list.
Okay.
Yes, so the certified veterinary or the board certified veterinary dentists would tell you that they don't want their patients eating kibble, and so it does actually like hasten periodontal disease because it coats the teeth with carbohydrates, which is like the enemy of the cat, the carbohydrate.
And then hydrolyzed protein diets. What are your thoughts with regards to that? Is there an issue with mercury content, or in some cases, I guess these diets are recommended due to chronic diarrhea issues?
The hydrolyzed diets, yes. The mercury content, that is a tricky one. I would say that feeding fish every day, you're going to have a problem with what we have in the ocean. I guess I should say that. But most of the hydrolyzed diets, I don't think are fish right now. I could be wrong about that. I tend not to use hydrolyzed diets for my patients. Let's see. And then as far as what was the second part of that question?
Well, I think you referenced it. So as it was, one person wrote in talking about hydrolyzed diet has been recommended due to chronic diarrhea. And so, and then the second part of the question was, is the concern around mercury content. So sort of those two parts there. Yep. Are there specific ingredients in canned food that we should avoid? Carrageenan or carrageenan or whatever was one thing that was mentioned.
Yeah, carrageenan. It does get a bad name, and I've actually looked into this a lot. I don't think it's probably like the problem we think it is. The worry is that it causes it could cause in people some intestinal inflammation, but there are two types of carrageenan, and usually what's used in food is food grade, and so I don't tend to think it to be a problem. And that being said, I think every cat is different. And so if you're concerned that it could be causing a problem for your cat, like let's say your cat has inflammatory bowel disease or is a chronic vomiter, I do think that you could try to find one without. But what carrageenan does is it just it makes the texture of the canned food. So it's a little bit hard to get like that pate without it. But I could not find enough research out there to prove that it was actually pro-inflammatory. There's a type of carrageenan out there that's not used in foods that is inflammatory, and that's where people started extrapolating from that study, like, oh, it's inflammatory, so we shouldn't be feeding it, but that's not the type that's in your cat's food.
Do you have any thoughts around warming your cat's food in microwaves?
Oh, yeah, as far as like the detriment of a microwave, is that
Yes,
what the,
I
yes.
believe that's the way the way it's going.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so I live in Boulder County and no one wants to use a microwave. And for the longest time, I didn't use a microwave either because I just assumed like I don't want, radiation around my head or something. But I have a good friend who's a physicist and he was explaining the actual physics of a microwave, and it does actually seem to be pretty safe. And I went to try to find studies to show that it wasn't, and I couldn't find any. So I actually use a microwave to heat stuff up. But if you're concerned, and I did this for like decades, use the toaster oven.
Ah, very good. Is there a listing of holistic veterinarians that, or like, an association or something where people can go to see if they can find one near them?
Yes. So the AHVMA, so the American Association of Holistic Veterinarians, you could go there. And I wonder how I could put this in somewhere.
If you put it in the chat, Kristen can move it into the chat for everybody else.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the ahvma.org. And ivits.org, that's for Chinese medicine. But if you do Chinese medicine, you're probably pretty holistic. So
Awesome. And then do you have thoughts about when and like how to transition from kitten food to adult food?
yeah, I do. So usually we make the demarcation from kitten to adult around a year. And so you could just slowly transition formulas. Although most foods these days are all life stages. So unless you're feeding a kitten only, most foods are meant for both.
Do you have, I'm going to ask you, okay, we have any thoughts and ideas for someone who has a cat with one kidney about
Well,
diet, or would you approach them any differently than a
I
cat with a,
wouldn't.
no? Okay.
No, but I would be doing, as they age, I would be doing blood work like a lot more often. So like, usually around 10 to 12, I start doing it every 6 months to a year. But I probably would do it more frequently just to check in.
What do you think about sub-Q fluids for cats?
I think they're great. For most cases, I think, cats are terrible hydrators. So when they're sick for any reason, giving them fluids, unless they have heart disease, is usually pretty supportive.
Do you ever have like specific recommendations on like the amounts to feed? I know you want to feed multiple times during the day, but are there specific amounts that you recommend?
It really depends on, I mean, if you wanted to go as far as to count calories, we could start counting calories, but usually what I do is I feed to body condition. And so, or you could weigh your cat and see like, okay, if I'm trying to get a weight loss, then, you just start feeding less. But what I do for my own animals, because I'm not going to count calories, nor am I going to weigh my cat so often, is I just start looking at his waist and his little jungle pouch. That's how I assess my own cats and my patients too. And so I just try to either cut back, or I'll sometimes look at the calorie density of a food or a tree and just see like, okay, this is where I could cut out some.
Do you have any thoughts or suggestions or ideas for a person, who might have limited resources and a multi-cat household? What would be the most cost-effective way to be able to feed them? Because it does add up, and it can become half of a month's rent.
It
So
really can. It really can. So what I do in those situations is, I mean, sometimes kibble is definitely warranted. So kibble is definitely the cheapest way. But to be honest, and I hate to admit this, but sometimes Fancy Feast can be just as good. Some the lower end canned foods are actually just as good and maybe even better than the high end kibble. And so if you could, even if you have to do kibble, if you could just like take the wheat, corn, soy out of it, and then pick some of the canned foods that are, maybe not the the most expensive, but cats generally really like them. So I mean, all you can do is your best and know that, that's all you can do, and it's okay.
Are there scientific studies that talk about the benefits of CBD for cats?
Yes, for dogs. No, we have for dogs. I don't know. Why do dogs get everything first?
They do. We're discovering that today. Everything. The dogs get it all. There's just no research happening with regards to cats. It's just, oh,
I know. It's so frustrating. It's coming. It definitely is coming. I bet we'll see them come out hopefully soon. I say this like hopefully soon because it's quite frustrating.
so it's all about dogs at this point in time, CBD. It's anecdotal experience with your clients. I mean, I know in my case with Misha, I was treating her. I gave her CBD because she was diagnosed with oral cancer, and she'd always been kind of a stiff, kind of overweight cat. And all of a sudden, she hadn't been able to jump up on beds or couches or anything. And when I put her on the CBD for the cancer, all of a sudden she became able to jump on everything. And she was a
Yes.
whole like new cat. And I was like, this was not expected. I totally did not expect it. So folks are asking, well, what can CBD be used for? Can it be used for aggression, or other issues in addition to just, arthritis or something like that?
Absolutely. I use CBD for almost anything because I have a lot of cases just like yours where you're using it to treat one thing and then you have all these amazing side effects. So I use it for chronic herpes cats with the eye infections, boogery cats. I use it for inner cat aggression, like in the house when they're upset with each other. It really reduces stress. I use it for cystitis, cats that are peeing everywhere, either from a behavior problem or because their bladder hurts all the time. I use it for arthritis. I use it for cancer. Yeah, I use it a lot.
Okay. And then let's see here. Oh, so the next part of our conversation, I just want to ask you a bit about, so thoughts about community cats and feeding community cats. One person was talking about how trying to use like Stella and Chewy's raw kibble. No one in her house likes it. None of her community cats like it. But what are the things? What are the things that we? That's just one example. But I'm just saying, as community cat feeders, are there things that we can take from our indoor cat nutrition learning and bring it outdoors? Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that?
Well, I think, our community cats, they're probably still really healthy even when we supplement their diet with kibble, because they're walking all the time. They're not inside with a bunch of other cats. Sometimes they're spayed and neutered, sometimes not. And they're catching, prey. And so I feel like kibble for them is not as detrimental. And I think it's probably the only, we could feed them like a raw kibble or but that's really hard to do and really expensive to do at scale. And so I think they're probably already just doing the things that we take away from cats when we bring them inside.
Can CBD help kitties with IBD and also help renal failure kitties?
I do think that cats with IBD can benefit. My patients that have really severe IBD, I don't ever think that I'm going to manage them on CBD alone, but it certainly can help. With renal disease, I would say CBD is helpful, not because it's going to help the renal disease, but it will decrease inflammation, so that's helpful for the kidneys. But by the time you're in the stage of life where your kitty has renal disease, they probably have other things like arthritis or other types of things that can be stressful. And so I use CBD in cats with renal disease, kind of indirectly for the renal disease.
Do you offer virtual nutrition consultations?
It really depends on what you're looking for. You can always email, me and say this is what you're looking for, and then I can tell you if I'm the best person, or I can get you in touch with someone that can help.
What do you do with a cat that will not eat wet food?
You know, sometimes, you know, for the most part, cats are going to do what they want to do. And they're, you know, you can try as much as you want. And there are people that are, you know, that can convert any cat. And so if you have tried and tried and, you know, done all the things like put the raw food just one little piece at a time and done those things, then I think at some point you just accept what you have. You can't wait a cat out like you can a dog. If cats go more than 72 hours without eating and they happen to be overweight, they're at such a high risk of fatty liver disease, which is a really dangerous place to be. So I feel like cats will usually win that one. And so if they don't want to do it, most cats aren't going to do it.
Should we keep cat grass or other greens available for indoor cats? Are there other ways to add greens or vegetation that outdoor cats would normally graze on?
Yes, I like growing cat grass. And it is one plant that makes me feel good about myself. I can grow it and keep it alive. My cat always mows it down. And so, yeah, you can just get the seeds and you just get like this really low, like shallow tray, and it just grows so easily. And then your cat will probably really enjoy it. Now, my cat frantically eats it and then vomits. So I have to ration it for him. If I were to grow a big tray and just let him at it, he would vomit all over the house because he eats it so quickly and so much of it. He's not
Yeah,
one for moderation.
I had a kitty that loved spider plants, and I also had a ficus tree that was like also our Christmas tree too. But by the end of her time, which this took years because this was a big ficus tree, so it took her years. She was a feral, and she you know, an indoor feral, and she just ended up kind of working on it. And by the end, when the you know the tree was like 20 years old when we moved, and the poor tree, it just was like between age and the cat, you know, the poor tree had all the lower branches were like these sticks sticking out and everything. So
Yes.
see, everybody's getting to know all my secrets this weekend. I have, you know, everybody's getting to know everything about my cat. So anyway, but she really, but then the cat grass now, a cat grass, I grew it successfully first time around, but then I let it die. I'm not so great with the plants either. So, but anyway.
Yeah, it's easy to grow, right? You feel good. You feel
Right. So then I
good.
went back to the grocery store and I got myself another tray of like one of those like kits because I can't even handle like the dirt and the seed thing. Like,
Yeah.
I have to keep it very basic for me.
Yes.
All right. So let's see if we have any more questions here. Um, is it normal for cats to go nuts over corn, and is it bad for them? He will chew it off the cob if given a chance. Now, this is a cat. If you're talking, this is from Kim Freeman. I'm sorry, I have to share your name, Kim. Now, this is a cat that I think she's talking about Henry. Now, Henry is a cat sniffing cat. So she does lost and found using him for a scent tracking to scent track for other cats. So Henry is a unique kitty.
I think it's probably okay. I think it's kind of funny, and I would love for her to send me a video of this because a cat eating corn off the cob would just make my day so much better. I think it's probably okay. I think that cats get into trouble with too many carbohydrates in like really dense situations, so I can't imagine some corn kernels being a problem, and I think that's kind of fun.
And someone else chimed. I've had cats that love corn on the cob too, so I guess that seems to be a thing. I don't know. Some of my cat, we got another corn. I've got 3 corn on the cobbers here. The
We have
theory
to
is
have video.
maybe it's the if you is it the butter? Do you guys all butter? Because this person was saying maybe it's the butter, but other ones. So anyway, I've got a question here. We've got Prozac. Let's talk Prozac.
Yeah.
So person has kitty on Prozac for overstimulation. He's a former orphan bottle baby. He bites me all the time, not too hard, but it hurts. Any other therapies I can try? CBD doesn't work as
Mhm.
far as she can tell.
Yeah, and if the Prozac isn't working, then it's probably time to either try a different dose of Prozac or try a different drug. But we have a lot of good drugs that we use for cats. Sometimes amitriptyline could be helpful, but I also wonder if like it's a behavior thing. But it sounds like I think I'd have to know more information about, is the biting aggressive or is it communication? I wonder too, there's a cat behaviorist, the catbehaviorclinic.com. I wonder what she would say too, because she might have some things that we can do with the medication to help modify the behavior in conjunction.
Sounds good. Excellent. Excellent. Oh, my last question for you is about litter box locations. You were talking about how it's good to put the litter box kind of down in the basement so that the cat has to kind of get the exercise to go down. But if you talk to a lot of behaviorists, they're always like, oh, well, you need a litter box on every floor and you need it like in the middle of the living room, so that it's easily visible and all that kind of stuff. And so are we trying to, now I've had the period where I have like the 4 litter boxes in the laundry room all next to each other. And because I had like toddlers in the house, and so like the last thing I needed was my toddlers like climbing into the litter boxes and all that kind of stuff. So when you have kids, you kind of have to pick your battles basically. But then as my kids grew up and they knew not to climb in the litter boxes and my cats got older, I started adding more litter boxes to the levels because of the arthritic hips and that kind of stuff. And so, is that an evolutionary process that we do with that litter box placement?
Yes, I mean, I think there's like the gold standard, and gold standard is I'd have one on every floor. And I only have one cat right now. And so there are a lot of reasons, and he's good about using the litter box or at least getting close to the litter box. And so I know right now that I can put it on, 2 floors away from where he hangs out and he's going to use it. If he had trouble just even walking in the litter box, then I would probably modify that. But I also live in a really tiny house. And so sometimes it's hard to like meet those recommendations and you kind of have to know your cat. I think when you have more than one cat, it becomes tricky. And so when I had 3 cats, I actually did follow some of those recommendations because you're going to have to modify it to like what is actually possible in your life. And I have 2 small children. And so when I had 3 cats, I thought, okay, I did do 4 litter boxes, but like I did it like you did, where they were all next to each other. So everyone, and I could kind of tell like this was like the pee litter box and here's the poop litter box. And this was one cat's litter box. Like they kind of get, you just give them some options. But the cat behaviorist would be so appalled that I do not have a litter box on every floor. I'm not following the rules at all.
We all have our secrets.
Yeah.
I always used to say, if I had to fill out an adoption application for my own organization, I probably would not get approved because, I've done something that hasn't, passed snuff or whatever. So it's what it is. But Dr. Angie, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Again.